ground that we've made up the last month. You can see it slips away pretty quickly if you start losing games. So I think, the next game obviously is a must-win for us.
Do you agree with Jordan Eberle? Is this next game against Edmonton to close out the road trip a must-win game for the Seattle Kraken? Well, let's talk about that and, of course, the performance last night at MSG. That and more coming up on today's episode of Locked On Kraken.
You are Locked On Kraken, your daily podcast on the Seattle Kraken, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
We are the Seattle Kraken.
Hey, what do you say, Seattle hockey fans? Welcome to another episode of Locked On Kraken. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, bringing you your favorite team every single day. My name is Erica L. Ayala. I am your host of Locked On Kraken. I'm also a writer at CBS Sports, founder of the media outlet Black Rosie Media, and we have our women's hockey podcast, the Founding Four podcast, as well as a podcast on the New York Liberty and the WNBA. Gotta Get Up, a podcast for New York Liberty fans that goes live on the Black Rosie Media YouTube page every week. It's actually interchangeable. So Founding Four one week, and then Gotta Get Up, a podcast for New York Liberty fans the next. So I open the show a little different than I usually do. If you are an everydayer, an OG, or whether you're watching on YouTube, hi YouTubers, or listening on your favorite app, including on the Sirius SXM app, I opened with a quote, a little snippet from Jordan Eberle in the locker room yesterday. And I heard him say this. I was at the game. For those who listened to yesterday's podcast, you know that I'm on the East Coast. And I heard him say that, and is he right? Is Jordan Eberle right? Is this next game against Edmonton a must-win game? I want us to think about that as we go through this episode, because if I'm being honest, I think a part of me is not necessarily questioning whether he's right. I think I'm questioning whether I want him to be right, which is a whole nother sack of potatoes, because the Seattle Kraken have dropped their last two as they're getting ready to close out this road trip, but they're also down players on IR, which we'll talk about, and there's some kind of mystery bug following the team. I know that Darren Brown from Sound of Hockey and also a contributor to NHL.com said that he was trying to, stay away from the guys yesterday as we were talking to them, in the locker room, in the visiting locker room, in the visiting corridor. It's just a tough time in the schedule for the Seattle Kraken to be down players, to have some kind of illness. I mean, it's flu season. Unfortunately, COVID's making its rounds. You've got the common cold, all kinds of stuff going around. It's a tough time. And so I think, honestly, it's not that I don't believe him and I take Eberle at his word. He knows he's playing in the games, right? I think it's that I don't want to believe him. I don't want to believe him because I think this is a really tough stretch. And next game, tomorrow's game against Edmonton, is a tough time to play Edmonton. But let me take you back to Eberle. You saw a little bit of that clip at the beginning of the show, but here's what Eberle had to say after a 5-2 loss to the Rangers at the world's greatest arena, Madison Square Garden.
Right now, but it feels like maybe those last 10 minutes of the second period were kind of a killer for you. What's your take? How do you digest this one?
Yeah, I mean, we had more than enough chances to find a way to win. I think defensively we obviously gave them some great A's, and I thought for the most part we played somewhat of our game. There were lapses at times, and we started turning pucks over maybe in the middle of the second, but I think the biggest thing is obviously this ground that we've made up the last month, you can see it can be slips away pretty quickly if you start losing games. So I think, the next game obviously is a must win for us. We got to find a way we'll get healthy first off, but find some jump, some energy, some passion, and take it into Edmonton.
You hear him talking about getting back the energy, getting back the jump. Jordan Eberle would go on to say, and I put some of this on social media last night, but he did go on to say that he felt that the team had much more jump than they did the night before. They're on a back-to-back, but he felt they did better than they did the night before against the Pittsburgh Penguins. And I actually want to take you to pregame because I asked Dave Haxtell, head coach of the Seattle Kraken, I asked him pregame, what do you do? What was the process like? They were able to fly into New York immediately after the Pittsburgh game because that was an afternoon game. So they got into New York last night. My understanding is that they're staying in New York. At least they got the overnight. They didn't hit the road right away. I think that's going to be good for them. But, what are you realistically trying to do? And here's what he said to me pregame, and it alludes to something that we'll talk about later on the show with regard to how he felt about this win, or about this game against the Rangers on Tuesday night.
Between yesterday and today, was it mostly just kind of recovery, film stuff, and preparation for tonight?
Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest with you, we didn't take a whole lot from yesterday. I mean, hey, you're always disappointed when you have a winnable hockey game, and that was. We just couldn't find a way to kickstart ourselves last night. We find that first goal at any point in time, even through the third period, and we feel like we have an opportunity to come away from that game with a point or two. We couldn't get that. We couldn't get that life. We couldn't find that energy. So a little bit of time to recover and recoup and rest up and be better tonight.
Didn't learn much from that Pittsburgh game, and it's a tough game to analyze within the context of what's happening in the Seattle Kraken season. And I mentioned that on I guess it would have been Monday's show because Tuesday's show was a squadcast. But for those who are new, squadcast is when I have another host from the Locked On network. So we did a crossover episode with Locked On New York Rangers. That was a weird feel in Pittsburgh. And then knowing that there's this illness that was going around, that's still going around. It was still an issue when I was with the team last night. Yeah. You kind of want to put it, just put it in the garbage, tuck it away. And I get the sense that's what Dave was saying. So I gave you a few quotes. Let's go over some notes. The Seattle Kraken on the good side of things, we scored two goals on the power play. You've got Jared McCann centering that top line with Tomas Tatar and Jordan Eberle. Both McCann and Eberle 2 points on the night against the Rangers. The bad news is that it was our discipline, our lack of discipline early in the game that gave some momentum to the Rangers. They scored their first 2 goals were power play goals. And then everything else, even strength, and their 5th goal was an even strength empty net. But the first 2 goals right off the hop, power play goals. The second one looked like Drieger got screened. Drieger, not as great of a performance as we saw last time he was in net. I already know, I don't want to stoke the flames on social media, but I know some people were a little disappointed to see Joey Decord in net against the Penguins and not Chris Drieger, and maybe flip those games around. Those are the shoulda, coulda, wouldas as armchair general managers that we can argue, but it is what it is. I thought Drieger was serviceable, not great, as we'll get to Allison Lucan's instant analysis. We'll talk about whether either goaltender had a quality start, but overall a better performance. So you like that, a better performance than we saw in Pittsburgh, which just looked flat. It looked ugly. It looked like we were maybe on, game 6 of a 6-game road trip, and that was a back-to-back. We looked fatigued. And knowing that there's an illness, it's not that you want to make an excuse. That being said, the fact of the matter that if you're playing hockey while not feeling well, particularly with maybe it's a seasonal flu or something, that's that's my best guess. It just kind of sounds like something when you travel with people. I mean, women, you might know, or anyone who menstruates, you might know this, but sometimes when you're traveling in a pack, you get all of the same bugs. You get all of the same little viruses, or people who have children, you get whatever your children have, and it just keeps going around. That's what it sounds like. It doesn't sound like it's anything that's going to be long term, except for the injuries. So we've got Matty Beniers. We've got Philip Grubauer was moved to long-term injury reserve. I think Emerald City Hockey did a great job kind of breaking that down. Not necessarily something to worry about, especially given how much time Philip Grubauer has already been out of the lineup. And it's likely more something to keep the bankroll where it needs to be and free up some cap space. Anyway, I've kind of alluded to the mysterious illness here and there, but coming up next on Locked On Kraken, let's hear from Dave on how he felt post-game. I told you what he said about Pittsburgh, and I want you to remember that because you're going to hear a clip from him in the next segment where he alludes to that as well. We're going to get into all of it, including a great Q&A that Allison Lucan did with our general manager, Ronnie Francis. He was at MSG yesterday, so we'll get into that coming up on today's episode of Locked On Kraken. Today's episode of Locked On Kraken brought to you by our friends at Sleeper. Now, we know it's the halfway point here for the National Hockey League, Kraken fans, and the performance up until the last 2 games has been really good. But as Eberle said, this next game against Edmonton, maybe it is a must-win. But regardless of that, the thing that you need to know regarding our current standings is that you can use your knowledge of the Seattle Kraken to win big by playing daily fantasy hockey on Sleeper, the official daily fantasy app of the Locked On NHL Network. Sleeper is our number 1 choice for daily fantasy sports, of course, including daily fantasy hockey. And especially because with Sleeper, you can win 100 times your cash in daily hockey contests. Now, what I love about Sleeper is that I can go before a game, like I'll do this tomorrow before Edmonton's game. I'll hop into the app. I can see the different projections, not just for Kraken players, but even for players from the opposition. And in this case, tomorrow's case, Edmonton. I can also look at the field that they have for the NHL overall. And all I need to do, and all you need to do to 100x your bet on Sleeper is correctly predict the outcome of 8 player stats. That's right, Kraken fans, you heard me right. You can win 100 times your money playing daily fantasy hockey with Sleeper. So start paying attention and nail your picks so you can start winning big. Use promo code LOCKEDONNHL and you'll get up to a $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply, but that's code LOCKEDONNHL. And make sure you see Sleeper's terms of use for details and locational availability. Thanks as always for making Locked On Kraken a part of your daily destination. After you listen to us, make sure you check out Locked On NHL, or you can head right over to our 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, Locked On Sports Today. It is the first ever national sports 24/7 channel on YouTube covering top sports stories of the day with local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows that cover and span every league. So go to Locked On Sports today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. Now, I mentioned earlier that you can listen to Locked On Kraken on Sirius SXM. You can also listen to Seattle Kraken broadcasts, or maybe you want to listen to the road broadcast if it's or a home broadcast, I guess, if the Seattle Kraken are playing on the road. I think that's amazing. You should definitely check out Sirius SXM, because not everyone is going to get the opportunity that I got last night to hear. It was Everett and Al on my left, JT and John on my right. It probably looked opposite on the video that I shared on social media. But so I'm at Madison Square Garden, the world's greatest arena, one of, from what I'm gathering, a bucket list for a lot of NHL reporters who are not from New York. But that was so cool. It was so cool to listen to them and to hear them work, because as some of you know, I actually call hockey games as well, and to be able to just hear different phrases that they say and maybe add that to the repertoire was a lot of fun. So it's always good catching up with those guys. They did a great job. Wasn't the result that we wanted, but it was about the result that I expected, if I'm being honest. Here's what Dave Haxtell had to say after the game, including how he feels the team has been able to rally back from, again, what's just an unfortunate timing for illness.
Dave, that's obviously a very skilled team on that side. What parts of your team's game did you feel they just didn't have tonight?
Difference really was the second period. I mean, we had great opportunities. We didn't execute, on the 2-on-1. Shesterkin made the save on Yamo, and the 3-on-1 we didn't execute. So really that's the difference in the hockey game. They got one through traffic. We made a mistake on the track on the fourth one on stepping up on it. We weren't able to capitalize on our opportunities, and that's the difference in the hockey game.
The power play, able to beat Shesterkin twice. So what did you like about how they were moving and what they were able to do?
Well, both were, one was a broken play, and Evs made a great play, great finish on the first one. And the last one, Jared McCann just taking it to the net and making a real good individual play on the entry, taking it to the net, taking the space that was available.
You said before the game there wasn't a lot that you were taking away from yesterday's game. Does that a little bit different tonight? Like, do you feel like there's a little more jump there tonight?
Got a lot more jump there. I mean, we still got a lot of guys that are fighting through things. That doesn't just clear up in a day, unfortunately. And some of the effects on guys that had to play big minutes last night were, that wears on you a little bit tonight. But yeah, no, our jump was, we had jump. We had some, we had some good opportunities. We had. Disappointing to come out of the second period where we were, and not be able to find one in the first 10 minutes. We didn't generate anything in the first 10 minutes of the third period, where I thought if we could get one, we might be able to push them back on their heels a little bit.
With Matty out, have you liked the way that McCann has slid into that spot?
Yeah, that's a tough role. He's, he played a little bit, obviously in the middle, a couple of nights ago, but to jump into that spot now, all of a sudden you're taking face-offs against Zibanejad. It changes the role when you step into that spot. But overall, that line tonight with the matchups that they were getting, created and generated the most for us.
What have you thought about Riker Evans' game these last two games and his composure out there, especially through some tough games?
Well, you know what, Riker, he took some heavy minutes last night, and he wasn't exactly feeling 100% himself. So he did a pretty good job last night. And tonight, I thought as the game went along tonight, he started to move his feet and use his skating ability more and more throughout the latter half of the game, and that's a confidence, significant, confidence boost right there.
So again, Dave talking about how there were improvements, but not necessarily the improvements that were enough to get a win against a good Rangers team. I mentioned that we would talk about Allison Lucan's post-game analysis. She had some really great nuggets here, including that, the Seattle Kraken played well 5-on-5. They created 59.6% of chances. They were good in the offensive zone, just shy of 4 minutes of total time, and 6 more shots from the slot than the Rangers, which I didn't necessarily pick up immediately on the eye test. I mentioned that the Kraken were 2 for 2 on the power play. So those are the good things. And there were definitely some good things coming up on Locked On Kraken. I want to take you over a little bit bigger picture. Let's talk about Ron Francis and his recent Q&A with the aforementioned Allison Lukan on NHL.com/Kraken. We're going to do that on the other side of this ad break from our friends and friends of the Locked On Podcast Network. And today's episode of Locked On Kraken also brought to you by our friends at eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. What brings home the winning trophy is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance, from superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED lights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with the eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. eBay eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. All right, Kraken fans, we're going to wrap this one up. Let's talk a little bit about where Ron Francis thinks the team is right now. Allison Lukan spoke to him in a Q&A that you can check out on NHL.com/Kraken. He talks about the Winter Classic being the first time since he retired in 2004 that he kind of wished he was still playing. I was out there. I had a great time. I think everyone that was at the event had a great time. So I loved seeing that. He said the crowd was about 60% home team and 40% road team. It kind of felt that way for sure. And he just felt that that was a really good time. He also talks about Oliver Bjorkstrand and his NHL All-Star nod. I'm hoping to catch up with Ollie soon, both for CBS and, of course, for our Locked On Kraken insiders. You'll get that first. He talks about Bjorkstrand being a very smart player. The maestro is such a smart player, whether it's getting a shot through the net or making a play for one of his teammates. That's exactly what I was talking about on our Squadcast episode yesterday, how Ali and that whole line of Yanni Gourde, along with Elle Tovinen, they just really are solid, as you hear Ron Francis saying, a 200-foot game. And so, I mean, I love this. So again, highly recommend, as always, that you read the work of Allison Lukan. I'm gutted I missed the Root Sports broadcast where she was back in studio. But don't worry, I record those, so I'll get to watch it. But check out that article. I walked you through it briefly. But again, the question of the day for this podcast was the quote from Eberle. Is this kind of a must-win game coming up against an Edmonton team that's on an 11-game heater? We fell, just short of that mark ourselves in what was a really tough part of our schedule. I know on YouTube we've got some comments that, if we can get through this little hump here, that we like our chances. Just to and again, we'll go over the Edmonton game a little bit tomorrow, but tomorrow we do have we're taking on the Edmonton Oilers. Then on Sunday, January 21st, we host the Toronto Maple Leafs. Then we host Ryan Donato and the Chicago NHL team on January 24th. Then we've got the Blues, the Blue Jackets, and the Sharks before we see the end of January. So that will take us through the Sharks game does take us through to the All-Star break. So is it a must-win game? I don't know. I think a lot depends, honestly, on how quickly we can get healthy again. But another thing that we have to take a look at, of course, is the standings. We'll go over this a little bit tomorrow, but just as a recap, the Seattle Kraken, haven't quite broken through to 50 points on the season, sitting at 47 points right now. That has us tied with Calgary, but we're behind them in the standings in that 6th spot. Vancouver really has been able to maintain that spot. We know Edmonton, again, on an 11-game winning streak, but we're within reach of them. They have 49 points on the season. That's in the Pacific Division. Now, when it comes to the wild card, we've been following this during our winning streak and that streak of points that we were able to collect, but we're on the outside looking in right now when it comes to the top 3 in the Pacific Division, which of course is Vancouver, Vegas, and LA. And we still got to worry about Nashville and Calgary. So if we could get some points against Edmonton, that would be huge. But Edmonton has been a challenge for us in the past. But we won't know until we play the games, so stick with us here on Locked On Kraken. Again, your host, Erica L. Ayala. I will catch you on the next episode, but like I always say, so as always, be kind to yourselves, be kind to one another, hold fast, stay true, and stay tuned for our game day episode coming up tomorrow. Peace.